Hello, and thank you for joining College to Consulting. Today's class is about networking strategies and tactics to ensure your name is at the top of the list, and it's really about info sessions, so how to approach an info session. If you remember from one of our first classes, I talked about info sessions and how it's a room with a few amount of consultants, but being surrounded by a semicircle of potential candidates, and I called those the failings. Now we're going to go more in depth about how to enter these groups and why networking is even important. So when you're networking, your goal is to ask questions to get data. Think about this. Your goal is to get data on the company that you can later talk about in an interview or you can talk about in your cover letter. Now, while you're doing this, the people you're talking to are evaluating you. And here's what they're thinking. And this is when I used to be in consulting, and my friends, we would basically ask each other these questions about the other candidates. Would I want to hang out with this person late if I was stuck in the office or in an airport? Will this person be able to learn quickly? How would this person talk to a client? And what qualifications should I mention to the team when referring to this person? Okay, so that's what we're thinking when you're talking to us. So let's talk about the actual info session. So in a room, this is what will happen. You'll have this phalanx, and how I mentioned this is you'll have a consultant, and this consultant will be surrounded by these people like this, and it's going to be very hard for you to penetrate the phalanx. And again, if you don't remember what a phalanx is, it was this geometric tactic that the ancient Greeks and Romans used with their shields to block themselves and the person to their right or their left by about a quarter of their body width. And what this did is it made an almost impenetrable force by arrows and spears and whatever. And essentially, this is the same thing. You have this fortress of these people that are blocking you from talking to a consultant. So let's talk about how to approach a phalanx. If you are in the situation where you need to enter a new group, which you most likely will be, this is why I recommend going to info sessions early so you can start off the phalanx. But if you're in the situation where you need to enter, here's what you can do. Here are some rules first. Don't be rude. If you are rude, it's very, very, very noticeable. If you cut people off, if you stop people from entering, which actually happens, you'd be surprised to see all this other type of stuff. If you block people, this is really, really rude, and the consultant's thinking, man, I really don't want to hang out with that person who's cutting people off, okay? So here's how you break a phalanx. Stand by someone who's there, doesn't matter whom. Stand by someone, listen to a question that is being answered, and then comment off of that question. Remember how I said when we have that question, what question do you have for me? You should listen to the answer and then do one more question off of that answer. Same thing here is someone else asks a question about why does this consultant like company X over company Y, whatever. Listen to it. When they give an answer, use a follow-up question, and that's how you're going to enter the phalanx. Now you are engaged in the conversation as well. Okay? Another thing is introduce others. If you have friends that come by and they want to join, introduce them. The reason is because, one, it's the right thing to do as they are people. But second of all, is now you show the consultant that you are someone who's nice, and you would do that in a other group situation. If they were in that same situation where the consultant is now your friend and they want to enter a group, you would introduce them. And so do that. Be nice. Next, ask questions that show you've done your homework. So here's what we talk about, the pyramid of questions, right? The basic questions, mid-level questions, and the advanced questions. So most people, I guarantee you, most people, like 80% of people, are going to ask these level 1 basic questions. They're all going to ask, why did you like this firm? Why did you pick this firm? What do you like most about consulting? They're going to ask these questions that require no research. What you should do is you should get in by asking a little bit more complex questions. I heard about Impact Day. So where was your Impact Day location for this year for Deloitte? Or I heard about Booze Cruise. Is Booze Cruise going to happen when PwC takes over Strategy? I mean, ask these types of questions. Or then you go really high level and you say, well, I read this white paper about this. If it aligns to their vertical. I read this white paper about energy, and I know that you're in energy. It said you guys were doing this. Have you been in any projects that have done similar type of work? And I say, yes, I actually was in that project where the white paper was written, or no, I haven't, but I know the guy, whatever, okay? That's what you want to do. Now, if you ask a question about a white paper, you will blow everyone else out of the water. No one will be able to engage in that conversation, and that conversation really just be between you and the consultant because you've done your homework. That's why I like white papers. Next, ask whom else you should speak with about your interests. So here's my thing. When you go to an info session, there'll probably maybe be 5 to 10 consultants, and your goal is to get information about the company, but also to be memorable. Remember this? I say always be memorable. So what this means is you need to be memorable with, I say, 3 people. If you can be memorable with 3 people, that way when your name gets called and they start talking about you, these 3 different people will have good things to say about you. Furthermore, what's good is that let's say you only talk with one person. You guys are best buddies and you're doing really, really well. If that person has to duck out early because they need to catch a flight or something, now that person won't vouch for you. So diversify your risk by talking to some other people. So here's what I say is, when you are talking to this Phalanx and you're talking to this consultants group, if you feel you've gotten everything you need to know, then move on. Ask whom else you could speak with about your interest. That's how you exit. You don't just leave. You say, thank you so much for your time. I'd really like to talk to some other folks about this. Do you know anyone else I could talk to about traveling, to New York, or maybe being in the energy field? And they'll say, yeah, actually go talk with that person. And then you now know how to move on. So after you get the information you need, again, excuse yourself, do what we just talked about, and then move to another consultant, and then repeat. So this is what's happening after you leave. Whispers. We're all talking about you. And this is essentially what you need to really consider. The HR rep will gather a list of names of people who were all the consultants, and then this person will get the list of everyone who checked into the event. And they'll go down the list, and he or she will ask, who talked to this person? Who talked to Mike? Who talked to Stephanie? Who talked to Steven? Whatever. And now what happens is the consultants will all give their impressions on you. And so this is why you have to be memorable. And they'll say, who talked to, Steven? And people will say, who was Steven? What did he look like? Oh, he was a guy wearing this. He was a guy wearing this, or whatever. So you don't just want it to be, he was a guy wearing this. You want to be, he was the guy wearing this who did that research on that white paper. Oh, yeah, that guy was cool. That's what you want to do, okay? So you do your research, and you want to get the love and the buy-in from at least 3 people, because now you have 3 people vouching for you rather than one person who's like, I really, really liked him. And then the other people say, I don't know who this person is at all. Sorry. Doesn't work out. So what you want to do, be memorable, as I mentioned, to at least 3 consultants. I think I've gone into that pretty more in depth, so you're good. And do that by discussing a white paper and discuss your experience and how it relates to consulting. Here's another good tip is what you can do during the Phalanx, you can ask to someone who's more of a newer person in consulting. You can ask them what clubs or sports they did in college that helped them prepare for consulting. This is a fantastic question to ask because they just got into consulting, so they're not really sure with the work, but they are fresh out of college. So they'll say, oh, I really like being in my rugby team, or I really like being in student government, or whatever. And now you can start to piggyback and ask other questions about that experience. So now you're memorable to them. So when they say, who's Steven? Someone might say, oh, it's that guy who asked about, who also had interest in being in student government or who knew about it. And we talked about how that related to consulting. Great. So now you're memorable, and that's what your goal is. Okay. So those are networking sessions. Again, don't be afraid. I say get there early. It will help out. And really think about this stuff. And remember, your goal is to be memorable and to get data. That's what you need to do with these networking sessions. And you don't really have several opportunities to go to networking sessions, so you got to go all in. Okay? All right. Thank you. And we'll talk more about this in the next class.